Clara Mae Thompson adjusted her mother's Navy shuttle service cap on her head, glanced down at the paper itinerary clutched in her hand, and sighed. One pickup. Name, Graham Whitaker. Delta flight from Boston, Gate 4. She pulled her worn duffel higher on her shoulder and walked toward the pickup zone, where the shuttle van was idling quietly in the no-parking zone. A thin breeze tugged at the hem of her light cardigan as she moved past clusters of arriving passengers, businessmen in pressed suits, vacationers towing noisy kids, and retirees sipping black coffee from plastic cups. She felt out of place. 2 days ago, she was reworking mood boards in her apartment for a client who never showed. Yesterday, her mom had twisted her ankle coming down the front porch steps and insisted, between winces, that Clara could handle the morning shift. "It's just a pickup," Lorraine had said. "One nice gentleman, a regular." "He's blind, so be on time, honey. And kind." Clara was used to picking out throw pillows, not passengers. She weaved through the crowd at the curbside pickup area, scanning for any sign of someone waiting alone. Her eyes locked on a tall man standing perfectly still beside a beige pillar, cane folded neatly under his arm. He wore a crisp linen jacket, sunglasses, and a quiet expression that held something between confidence and fatigue. His duffel sat at his feet, untouched. Clara stepped closer, brushing back a strand of hair. "Mr. Whitaker?" The man turned slightly, not startled. "Yes." "Clara Mae?" His voice was smooth, warm, deep, like late-night jazz on a rainy night. She exhaled, relieved and slightly thrown. "Yes, I'm Clara. I'm filling in for Lorraine today, my mom." "I figured," he said, smiling faintly. "Your voice is younger." "Lighter." She reached down to lift his duffel. "Let's get you settled. The shuttle's right this way." They walked side by side, his steps calm but certain, as if he'd memorized the layout of the airport. She kept a respectful pace, noting how he didn't reach for help, but allowed it when offered. Inside the van, the air conditioning hummed low and steady. Clara glanced at him in the rearview mirror as she pulled away from the terminal. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, the sunlight casting soft lines across his face. "Do you come down here often?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Not for a few years," he replied. "But I was born here, grew up just outside of Bluffton. I moved away for business. Then life got complicated." She tilted her head. "Complicated how?" There was a long pause, the kind that told her not to push. He eventually said, "Let's just say I built a life with clear lines and big numbers, and somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing what mattered." Clara nodded slowly, her fingers tightening on the wheel. She knew something about chasing what didn't chase you back. As they drove past stretches of marshland and over wooden bridges weathered by coastal winds, she glanced down at the itinerary again, her brow furrowed. Something didn't sit right. She was sure the last name on the itinerary had read Whitaker, but her memory of the first name now blurred. Her mom's writing was notoriously rushed. She shook the doubt off. No way there were 2 blind men with similar names arriving from Boston this morning. Still, "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a touch uncertain. "Can I just check something? Your full name. It's Graham Whitaker, right?" He nodded. "That's me?" Relieved, she smiled and focused back on the road. The van turned off the main highway toward Bluffton, where moss-draped oaks shaded winding streets lined with historic homes. Clara's heart always caught at the sight of them. Old porches with swinging benches, pastel shutters, bricks worn smooth by rain. He leaned forward slightly. "Describe what you're seeing." She blinked. "The houses? Everything." "I haven't been here in years. Humor me." She cleared her throat. "We just passed a white Victorian with seafoam green shutters and a porch swing. Looks like someone restored it recently. The kind of place with creaky floorboards but good bones. Next to it, there's a yellow cottage with a tin roof. And just now, we're coming up on this brick colonial. It's been repainted a dusty rose. Flowers in the yard, hydrangeas, blue and lavender. He smiled, eyes hidden behind his sunglasses. You see more than color. You see atmosphere, she blushed. Comes with the job. I used to design spaces before I stopped. She hesitated. It's a long story. I've got time, he said, leaning back again. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her mind flashed to the shoebox under her bed, filled with old sketchbooks. To the email she never replied to from an old professor asking why she never submitted her senior project. To the ex who said, "No one makes money with aesthetic." She kept her eyes on the road. "I guess I just forgot what made it worth doing," she said softly. "Or maybe I believed someone when I shouldn't have." He didn't respond, but something in the air shifted. Not pity, not silence. Presence. A ding broke the moment, her phone vibrating with a new message from her mom. "Honey, the real Mr. Whitaker is still waiting at gate 4. Did you leave already? He just called me." Clara's heart seized. She pulled into a quiet gravel turnout and parked. Hands shaking, she opened the message again. Her mouth went dry. She turned slowly toward the rear view. Graham, I think I've made a mistake." He tilted his head. "I wasn't supposed to pick you up. I had the wrong name. My mom just texted. Her client's still waiting at the terminal. I'm so sorry." There was a pause. Then he chuckled softly. "Well, that explains the hesitation in your voice." She blinked. You knew?" "Not exactly. But you sounded like someone who wasn't quite sure she was doing the right thing. Turns out you weren't." He leaned back, relaxed. "But I'm glad you did anyway." Clara stared at him, stunned. "You're not mad?" He shook his head. "No, I haven't had a conversation like this in a long time, and for what it's worth, you drive with care." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I'll call my mom. Get someone else to grab the real Mr. Whitaker." He nodded. "That's fine. In the meantime, would you mind taking a detour?" "A detour?" "There's a property I've been thinking about. Haven't seen it since I was a teenager. I'd like to know if it still breathes." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." As she drove back onto the narrow road, the sky broke open with early light. Not harsh, not blinding. Just soft golden warmth, filtering through trees like a promise. And for the first time in a long while, Clara felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake at all. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The van rolled slowly down a cracked, shell-paved road, flanked by towering oaks dressed in hanging moss. The kind of trees that whispered old stories if you drove slowly enough to hear them. Clara kept her hands steady on the wheel, stealing glances at the man in the rearview mirror. Graham hadn't said much since they pulled away from the turnout, only that he wanted to see a house he remembered from childhood. No address, no GPS coordinates, just the name Magnolia Lane and a quiet conviction that he'd know it when they arrived. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was laced with something else. Curiosity, reflection, and maybe the sense that this day had already stepped outside the normal lines of what life was supposed to look like. She exhaled and spoke without thinking. "You know, most people would have freaked out, me showing up by accident. Not the right driver, not the right anything." He tilted his head, voice gentle. "Most people rush through things so fast they forget the best parts are the accidents." Clara blinked. That's poetic. No, he said, smiling faintly. That's survival. They turned a slow bend, and there it was. The house stood alone behind a low, wrought-iron fence, its paint faded, its windows clouded. But the bones were regal, tall columns, sweeping porch, second-story balcony. It looked like a place that had once held music and laughter and secrets in equal measure. That's it, Graham said quietly, but with certainty. Clara pulled over to the shoulder and turned off the engine. The air outside was heavy with honeysuckle and the hum of insects. She leaned forward, peering at the building through the windshield. She's old, Clara said, but not broken. Graham nodded. When I was a boy, my aunt lived here. She had this wild garden in the back, full of rosemary and tomatoes and mint. Every summer we'd drink lemonade on that porch. The railing creaked when you leaned on it. Sounds like a memory worth keeping. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I left that memory behind when I left town. Funny how your roots don't stop growing just because you pretend they're gone. They sat in silence again. Clara traced her finger along a line of dust on the dashboard. She didn't know what made her say it, maybe the way the light hit the house just right, or how his voice carried weight without needing to be loud, but the words came out raw. I had a design professor once tell me I had quiet instincts, that I didn't need to shout with color or try too hard with trends. He said people like me made spaces that breathe. She paused. I believed him, until I let someone else tell me I wasn't enough. Graham turned his head slightly. Who told you that? She hesitated. An ex said my work was sweet, not commercial enough. Said I should be practical. Said I was wasting time chasing softness. There it was. The wound, still tender. And you believed him? She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. The air inside the van felt thick. She opened the door and stepped outside. Gravel crunched beneath her shoes. She leaned against the van and stared at the house, arms crossed tightly, as if she could hold herself together with just the right posture. Graham's door opened, and she turned, surprised. You don't have to, she began. I want to, he interrupted. He reached for the cane, folded neatly beside him, and unfolded it with practiced ease. Then he stepped out, walking with confidence that felt both rehearsed and real. She met him halfway. The ground's uneven here. I'm not made of glass, Clara May. She smiled. Just a little. They stood together at the edge of the property, separated from the porch by a gate left ajar. Graham tilted his face upward. I always wondered if it would feel the same. Does it? He inhaled. Not yet, but close. Clara's phone buzzed. She fished it from her back pocket and glanced at the screen. A new message from her mom. Did everything work out? You okay? Want me to send Jerry for backup? She stared at the message for a long second, then typed back. All good. We'll explain later. Then she tucked her phone away. Graham asked softly, You said you stopped designing. Why? She looked at him. Not just at his sunglasses or his cane, or the way his jaw tensed when he was thinking, but at him. Because I thought design was about getting somewhere. A job, a paycheck, an office with your name on the door. But now, I don't know. Maybe it's about returning. He tilted his head. To what? To what mattered before I let the world convince me it didn't. There was a pause. I think you're more designer than you know, he said. Something tightened in her throat. She swallowed hard. You know, she said, I've driven a lot of people to a lot of places. Airports, hotels, hospitals. But this is the first time I've driven someone who wanted to go back, he smiled, And this is the first time I've been picked up by mistake and didn't want to correct it. The tension between them shimmered like summer heat, not romantic yet, but intimate. Like two pieces of driftwood circling the same tide. She glanced at the time. We should get back. I have to swap out the van before noon. Graham nodded. Will you drive me tomorrow? She blinked. Tomorrow? I need to tour some properties. But more importantly, he paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. I think I need someone who sees the kinds of things I've forgotten how to look for. Her breath caught. Okay, she said quietly. Tomorrow. As she helped him into the van, something shifted. Not big, not dramatic, but a thread pulled tighter between them. A beginning, unintentional, unrushed. And as they drove away, neither of them noticed the faded sign near the porch of the house they'd just visited. But it was there, covered in ivy. Pending sale, Sunhaven Properties. A name Clara hadn't heard in years. Not since she'd drawn it, once, in the corner of a forgotten sketch. Not since she let go of something that had once been hers. The rain started just after noon. Not heavy, just a steady, soft rhythm, tapping against the windows of Clara's little studio apartment above the hardware store. The kind of rain that makes you think instead of sleep. She sat at her narrow drafting table, a sketchbook open, a pencil between her fingers, unmoving. She hadn't drawn in weeks. Maybe months. Her hand hovered over the page like it was waiting for permission. Outside, the street was quiet, except for the occasional hum of passing cars gliding over wet pavement. She watched them for a moment, then turned back to the page and drew one line, then another. And suddenly, the form of a porch took shape, the memory of the Magnolia Lane house settling into the curves of her pencil. There was a knock at the door. She startled, then walked barefoot to open it. Graham stood under a dark green umbrella, the kind with a wooden handle and a slightly torn edge. He wore a light jacket and held a paper bag in his left hand. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. How did you even get here? I asked your mother, he said simply. She said you were likely hiding out upstairs from your own talent. Clara blinked. He lifted the bag. I brought soup. She hesitated for a second too long, then stepped aside. Come in. The space was small but clean. Shelves lined one wall with stacked books, fabric samples, and jars of pencils. A half-unpacked box of her old college materials sat beneath the window. He moved carefully, sensing the space, and she quietly guided him to the armchair near the kitchenette. I wasn't expecting company, she said. He set the umbrella beside him and placed the bag on the table. That's usually when it matters most. She sat across from him, unsure what to do with her hands. You don't talk much about your work, he said after a moment. Clara looked away. There's not much to talk about anymore. I think that's a lie, he replied gently. I think there's too much. Her voice caught. It's just, it used to be mine. And then it wasn't. Tell me. She glanced toward the window, the rain now a steady hush behind them. I had a concept in college, a design for modular living spaces, small homes that breathe, that shift with light and time. I named it Sunhaven, submitted it to an anonymous contest through a third-party agency, never heard back. A year later, I saw something nearly identical featured in a magazine under another name. Different finishes, but the bones were mine. He didn't speak. Everyone told me to let it go. Said I didn't have proof, said the world doesn't stop for soft-spoken artists with no lawyers, so I let it die. I packed up my sketches and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Graham exhaled slowly. That's a hard silence to live in. She laughed, but it was brittle. You don't even know the half of it. Then show me, he said. Let me see what you buried. Clara hesitated. Then she rose, crossed to the box beneath the window, and pulled out a folder wrapped in twine. Her fingers trembled as she brought it to the table. She placed the sketches in front of him without saying a word. He reached forward, fingers brushing the edges gently, reading with his hands. His brow furrowed as he moved from one page to the next. Porch plans, sunlit alcoves, curved ceiling vaults. Do you see it? She asked, barely above a whisper. I do. She blinked quickly, her throat tightening. He tapped the corner of one sheet. This angle here, this flow of natural light into a gathering space. It's not just design, it's philosophy. She looked away. It was supposed to be about healing, creating space for people to breathe. It still is, he said. There was a pause. Then he added, I've seen this before, or something close. A firm in Charleston, Sunhaven Properties. They've been building models based on these concepts. But yours came first. Clara's chest tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying, he replied carefully, that the world didn't ignore you. It just gave your voice to someone else. The air between them stretched, thin and trembling. I can't fight this, Graham, she whispered. I don't have the money. You don't need to fight it alone. She stared at him. Why do you care? He was silent for a beat. Then he stood, walked toward her desk with slow precision, and picked up the sketch she'd started just hours ago. Because someone once told me that home isn't a place. It's the feeling of being understood. She didn't answer. Couldn't. I think you forgot what your voice sounds like, he said. But I haven't. Outside, the rain deepened, a sudden swell like a curtain dropping between the world and this small, quiet room. He turned toward the door. I'll be back tomorrow. We've got properties to visit, and you've got something to say again. She swallowed hard. Why are you really here, Graham? He paused at the threshold. Because, he said softly, I heard something in your silence that I couldn't ignore. He stepped into the rain, umbrella lifting over his head, vanishing down the stairs like a memory, walking backward into the present. Clara stood in the doorway long after he left. The sketch lay on her desk, unfinished. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drawing alone. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The next morning broke wide open, soaked in gold. The kind of savannah day that seemed to hum beneath your skin. Quiet, humid, electric, with something unspoken. Clara stood in front of her closet, barefoot, staring at clothes that didn't feel like her anymore. Graham was taking her to tour properties today. She didn't know what to wear for that, didn't know what to wear for someone who saw past every layer without needing to look. She reached for a white blouse, soft and loose, and jeans that hadn't made it out of the drawer in weeks. Nothing fancy, but honest. When she pulled up to his inn, he was already waiting at the curb. Dressed in charcoal slacks and a button-up rolled at the sleeves, his cane rested against his leg. The way he turned toward the sound of her engine, the way he smiled slightly before she even said hello, it landed somewhere just beneath her ribs. You're punctual, he said, climbing in. I didn't want to miss the ride, she answered. His smile deepened. Neither did I. They drove with the windows down, air thick with magnolia, and the sweet ache of summer. Graham had a list of properties he was considering for restoration. Small cottages, unused estates, forgotten structures that could breathe again, if someone just remembered how to listen. But as the morning stretched on, something else began to bloom between them. Not just the rhythm of conversation, but the silences, comforting, stretched like a hammock between trust and curiosity. "I never asked," Clara said as they pulled onto a quiet gravel road leading to an abandoned coastal property. "Why are you really buying houses down here?" "You've got money, reach. I'm guessing you could pick anywhere." Graham leaned back, his head resting against the seat. "Because I lost my vision the same year I lost my sense of home," he said quietly. "I was living in Boston. Everything was fast. Money, power, strategy, return on investment. But when I went blind, everything changed." The silence came, the stillness, and none of the places I owned felt like shelter. Clara's hands stilled on the wheel. "I realized I'd built walls, not spaces," he continued. "Then I started remembering the porch in Bluffton, the creek, the mint in the garden, the way evening air felt on my face. I thought, maybe if I found that house, I'd find my way back." She glanced at him, her chest aching with something too warm to be pity. He wasn't broken. He was rebuilding. They parked in front of a coastal bungalow, weather-worn but striking. The bones were beautiful, wrap-around porch, slate-blue shutters. Clara helped him out, letting his hand find her elbow for the short walk to the front steps. Inside, the air was stale with dust and time. Light slanted through torn curtains. But Clara saw it immediately, where the room could breathe, where the walls could open, where the past could soften. "Describe it," Graham said. She did, in low, reverent tones. "The floors are original pine, but warped. There's a fireplace, stone, river rock maybe, and the kitchen's tucked behind an archway. The ceilings are low but intimate. It's a place that wants to be trusted again." He smiled, small. "You speak about rooms like they have hearts." Clara's breath caught. "Because they do." He reached out slowly toward the window frame. His fingers brushed a strip of paper tacked to the sill. She stepped closer, frowning. "What is it?" he asked. She peeled the paper back gently. Her voice went still. "It's a brochure from Sunhaven Properties." He froze. Clara turned it over. The logo was embossed. Polished, marketed, but the layout, the concept drawings, her drawings. It hit like cold water. "This is my design," she whispered. "This exact floor plan. This layout. The shelving built into the beams, the skylight over the stove. I drew this. I remember the night I designed that kitchen. I was eating cold spaghetti and sketching on my knees." Graham's hand curled slightly at his side. "Are you sure?" She handed him the paper. "It's mine." They changed the finishes, the colors, but this was my heartbeat. The room tilted slightly around her. She backed up until her shoulder touched the doorframe. "They stole it," she said, voice cracking. "I buried this because I thought I was just being dramatic, but this is proof. This is real." Graham folded the paper and tucked it gently into his jacket pocket. "Clara." She looked up. "I knew." Her breath stopped. "I recognized your name, your sketches. When I saw them in your studio yesterday, I realized it was you." Sunhaven Properties bought this concept 3 years ago through a submission channel, anonymous. Just the initials, CMT. It was buried in a batch from a licensing agency. Her voice trembled. "And you didn't say anything?" "I wanted to be sure," he said, "and I wanted you to remember what it felt like before someone else's shadow got in the way." She turned away, blinking back tears. "You should have told me. I know. But I've seen what happens when someone reclaims their voice too soon. The world doesn't listen. It watches. And it waits to see if you flinch. She stared out the broken window, rain beginning to patter against the porch outside. "I gave up on this," she whispered. "I thought maybe I'd imagined the theft. That maybe I was small and forgettable and easy to overlook." Graham stepped closer. Not to fix, not to soothe. Just to stand with her. "You weren't forgotten," he said. "You were silenced." "There's a difference." She turned to face him, her voice shaking. "What do I do now?" He met her gaze, steady and quiet. "You decide if the world gets to name you, or if you do." The wind pushed against the shutters. The house groaned softly, like it remembered. Clara walked to the fireplace and touched the cold stone. "I want it back," she said. Graham nodded. "Then let's begin." Outside, the storm gathered. But inside, something had shifted. Not fear, resolve. Clara hadn't said a word since they left the bungalow. The van's tires hummed against the coastal road, the silence between them dense with everything unsaid. Graham sat in the passenger seat, his head turned slightly toward the window, the folded Sunhaven brochure still tucked in his jacket pocket, like a truth neither of them knew how to carry yet. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, jaw set. "Clara," he said quietly. She didn't answer. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Her voice came low, rough. "You knew for how long?" "I suspected when I saw the original sketch. Confirmed it yesterday after I called a friend at the agency." She exhaled, sharp. "And you still let me walk into that house today without knowing what I'd see?" He turned to face her, voice steady. "I needed you to feel it. Not through me. Through your own eyes, your own hands." She pulled the van over abruptly onto a grassy shoulder, the engine still running. The wind blew through the open window, warm and restless. Clara faced him now, her voice trembling with restraint. "Do you know how many years I've questioned myself? How many times I looked at that sketch and thought maybe I imagined it being taken?" "I do," he said, not flinching. "That's why this moment had to be yours." "But it wasn't just a moment," she said, her voice breaking. "It was my life, my work. The one thing I built when everything else fell apart. And I let it slip away because I thought I didn't matter enough to fight for it." Graham didn't try to defend himself. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "And do you still believe that?" She blinked, her breath catching. "No," she whispered. "I don't." He nodded once, almost like a prayer. A long pause. Then, softer, she asked, "Who owns it now?" Sunhaven Properties holds the brand, but the original concept licensing came through a third-party collective. No clear author, which means if we can connect the original files to you, it's possible to make a legal claim. She laughed under her breath, bitter and tired. "Legal claims need lawyers. Lawyers need money." Graham tilted his head. "Let me help." "No," she said quickly. "That's not why I told you." "I know. But I'm not offering because you need charity. I'm offering because your work changed me before I ever met you. I was blind long before I lost my sight, Clara. Your design, it made me feel something again. Before I knew your name, before I knew your story." She closed her eyes. That hit deeper than she wanted to admit. "What do you want from me?" she asked, not coldly, but like someone tired of being turned into a transaction. He shook his head. "I don't want anything but your voice in the room where decisions get made. You deserve to be heard, not rescued." She looked at him for a long time. The silence this time wasn't heavy. It was waiting. Then, slowly, she shifted the van back into drive. "Take me to where it started," she said. Graham turned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Where you first saw my design, the project." The people using it. If I'm going to take my name back, I need to see who's living in what I built." He smiled, just a little. "Then we'll start at the model home." It was late afternoon by the time they pulled into the Sunhaven demonstration site on the outskirts of Charleston. The clouds had lifted, but the ground still smelled like rain and old clay. Clara parked on the gravel lot, her eyes locked on the glass-fronted building ahead. It was sleek, styled, minimalist, the kind of structure that drew words like clean lines and modern simplicity from overpaid marketing teams. But underneath all the gloss, she saw the blueprint of her bones. Graham stayed in the van while Clara stepped out, walking slowly toward the house. She passed couples holding pamphlets, a real estate rep chatting to a family near the flower beds, the sound of soft jazz spilling from outdoor speakers. No one looked at her. No one knew. She stepped onto the porch. The railing, her curve, the light slant through the clerestory windows, her design. Even the warm oak shelving in the foyer was shaped like the one she had drawn on a paper napkin during a sleepless night in college. She stood in the center of the model home's main room, surrounded by curated furniture and fake bowls of lemons, and felt a strange mix of pride and grief tighten in her chest. A voice behind her broke the silence. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She turned. A woman, late 30s, stood beside her. Tall, striking, confidently dressed. She extended a hand. "Celia Armstrong, lead designer on the Sunhaven project." Clara stared at the hand, then took it slowly. "Clara May Thompson," she said. Celia's smile flickered. "Have we met?" Clara smiled, calm but sharp. "Once. In a lecture hall. You told me I had a nice touch but needed more commercial instinct." Celia tilted her head. "Design school." "That was, what, 7, 8 years ago?" "Closer to 6, Clara said. A pause. Then Celia's eyes narrowed, calculating. "Well, clearly you found your way back," she said, voice still pleasant. "I never left," Clara replied. "I just took the long road home." Celia's gaze dropped briefly to the sketchpad in Clara's hand. Her smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. "We should catch up sometime. I'm always looking for fresh collaborators." Clara didn't answer. She turned and walked slowly out the door. When she got back to the van, Graham was still in the passenger seat, listening. "She was there," Clara said quietly. "She recognized me." Pretended she didn't. And the look in her eyes when I said my name. "She knew." "She always did," Graham said. Clara rested her head against the steering wheel. "She built a career on my silence. And now," he said, "you're done being quiet." She didn't speak for a long time. Then she looked at him, eyes shining but steady. "Let's tell the world." Clara sat on the edge of her bed, bare feet pressed to the cool wood floor, phone in one hand, the other clenched tight in her lap. The sketchpad lay open beside her, a graphite-stained fingerprint smudged across the edge of the page where she'd traced and retraced the same contour line over and over, like if she kept going, maybe the truth would change. But it didn't. Celia Armstrong had taken her work, worn it like a tailored suit, spoken on panels, signed magazine interviews, built a reputation on something born in the quiet, flickering hours of Clara's lowest days. She dialed. The phone rang once, then again, then a third time before Lorraine's voice came through, thick with warmth, always a balm. "Hey, baby, everything okay?" Clara blinked fast. I think I need to tell the truth, Mom." Silence. "Is this about your design?" Lorraine asked, gentler now. Clara nodded, even though her mother couldn't see it. "They stole it." "Years ago, and I just saw it. My actual work, my sketches, everything." Lorraine sighed, soft and slow.
I always knew you weren't crazy, just scared.
Clara swallowed.
Do you think I waited too long?
No, Lorraine said without hesitation. I think you were waiting for the day you'd stop asking permission. Clara's throat tightened. I'm scared. You should be. That means it's real. But don't you let fear tell you that truth has an expiration date. She closed her eyes. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby girl. Go take your name back. After she hung up, Clara stood at the window, staring down at the street below, where dusk folded the day into deeper colors. Lights blinked on across balconies and porches. A man walked his dog, a child tossed a ball between her hands, the city moving in its quiet choreography. She heard the knock before she saw the shadow shift through the glass. Graham stood at the door, a folded newspaper in one hand, the other resting on his cane. She opened it without a word. You saw her, he said. Clara nodded. And she saw me. He stepped inside, pausing only to fold the newspaper and place it on the side table. You ready? No, she said. But I don't think I need to be. They sat in the living room, the lamp casting soft golden light between them. Clara opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Write it, Graham said quietly. I don't know where to start. Yes, you do. She stared at the screen. Then slowly, like breath returning to lungs that had forgotten how to fill, she typed, 3 years ago, I sketched a space that felt like sunlight. I didn't have a name, a platform, or protection. Just a pencil, a deadline, and a dream. Her hands moved faster now. I submitted that design under the name Sunhaven, through an anonymous licensing call. I never heard back. I assumed it was passed over, forgotten. Graham leaned forward, listening with a stillness that felt like reverence. Clara continued typing. Until last week, when I walked into a model home built from that exact sketch. It bore a new name. It had someone else's voice attached to it, but the lines were mine. The details, the intention, the breath inside those walls, they were mine. She paused. Her hand shook slightly. I don't want to come off bitter, she said. You sound brave, Graham replied. She looked at him. What if people think I'm lying or attention-seeking? He tilted his head. Then let them. But the people who need to hear this, they'll see it. She swallowed, typed again. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to reclaim. Then, without allowing herself another pause, she added the sketches. Scanned images of her original napkin drafts. The concept board dated from her senior project. Photos of the model home she took discreetly during the visit. She sat back. Then hit post. The moment after was the quietest she had ever known. A space where time folded inward and everything hung still. Then, slowly, comments began to trickle in. First one, then 3, then dozens. I remember this from her college showcase. Clara, this design changed how I think about space. I interned at the firm. I saw her sketches. I always wondered why she wasn't credited. Her breath hitched. The screen blurred. You did it, Graham said. She turned to him, eyes wet but burning. I didn't do it for revenge. I know. She looked down. But I do want justice. He reached across the space between them, not to pull her in, but to place something small on the coffee table. It was a USB drive. Silver, unmarked. What's this? She asked. My archive, he said. The one from my acquisition records. You'll find a licensing receipt with your initials. The timestamp matches your sketch submission exactly. It proves you were first. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. You had this the whole time? I was waiting, he said. For you to be ready to hold it. She couldn't speak. Clara, he said, your work matters, not just because it's beautiful, but because it came from a place most people are too scared to go. That kind of truth doesn't get erased. It just waits. A beat passed. Then two, and she whispered, Will you stand with me when this gets hard? He smiled softly. I already am. They sat like that, shadows lengthening across the room, her story echoing out into a world finally listening. And just outside the window, the city breathed with her. By morning, Clara's post had spread like ink in water. She hadn't slept much. Her phone buzzed through the night. Messages from classmates she hadn't heard from in years. Local designers, 2 old professors, even a blog that had once rejected her portfolio. Each notification pulsed with the same undertone. We saw. We believe you. And then came the call she wasn't ready for. She answered on the 3rd ring, standing barefoot in the kitchen with a chipped mug of tea cooling beside her. Clara May Thompson? The woman's voice was professional, clipped. Yes, speaking. This is Dana Lynn, PR coordinator for Sunhaven Properties. We saw your post last night. The company takes intellectual property claims very seriously. We're reviewing internally. Clara's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. I have proof. Sketches, timestamps, an acquisition record. It's not just a claim. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to remind you who holds the louder microphone. Understood, Dana replied. We would appreciate you refraining from further public commentary until we've resolved this matter through the appropriate channels. Clara's jaw clenched. You mean quietly? Another pause. You're entitled to your perspective. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Clara stared at her phone. Then, slowly, she opened her laptop. Her post had passed 50,000 shares. When she looked up, Graham was already at the door. She opened it wordlessly. You look like someone just tried to put your fire out, he said. They want me to be quiet again. He stepped inside, brushing the humidity from his sleeves. And what do you want? Her voice didn't shake this time. To be louder, he nodded. Then we'll need more than a post. You need a room. An audience. A reason for them to look and see. She turned to him. You're thinking something. I'm thinking about the restoration showcase next week. Hosted in Beaufort. All the local firms will be there, even some from Atlanta. I'm not on the guest list. You are now. She frowned. They don't just let anyone present. I know, he said, but I'm not anyone. Later that afternoon, Clara stood inside the event space, an open, sun-drenched hall lined with display tables, design boards, and panels waiting to be filled with stories. Volunteers moved quietly in the background, pinning materials, straightening chairs, adjusting lighting. Clara's space was tucked in a quiet corner by the east window, modest, unassuming. Hers. She set out her original sketches, concept notes, and a printed version of the Sunhaven model house flyer, with the signature torn off, just enough to make the similarities obvious. Graham stood behind her, cane in hand, expression unreadable. You nervous? He asked. I feel like I'm about to walk into a room full of people who've already made up their minds. He nodded. Then give them something worth unmaking. People began to arrive. Designers, investors, architects in sharp jackets. Clara kept her eyes down, adjusting a display board. She could feel the shift in the room, the way attention quietly turned toward her table, not loud, just watching. And then she heard the heels. Celia. She turned slowly. The other woman approached with deliberate grace, a wine-colored dress hugging her frame, her designer badge clipped too neatly to her lapel. "Clara," she said, voice smooth. "Didn't expect to see you here." Clara straightened. "That makes two of us." Celia glanced over the sketches, her gaze carefully neutral. "You've stirred up quite a wave." "You always did have passion." Clara met her eyes. "And you always knew how to edit it out." A flicker passed across Celia's face. "This could have stayed quiet." "And now it won't," Clara said. "Not anymore." Celia looked down at the acquisition receipt pinned beside the sketch, her smile barely held. "Well, if the truth fits." She turned and walked away. Graham moved beside Clara, his voice low. "You okay?" Clara took a breath. "Better than I thought I'd be." The next 30 minutes blurred. Questions, conversations, quiet nods. A local editor stopped to take photos. A former Sunhaven intern left a quiet note on Clara's table. "I remember your work from the archives. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." And then came the voice she hadn't heard in over a year. "Well, look who finally decided to make noise." She turned. Matt Vance. His hair was shorter. Same smug smile, though faded now by something less confident. He wore a light blue shirt rolled at the sleeves and carried an espresso he hadn't paid enough attention to not spill on his own clipboard. "Matt," Clara said evenly. "Still following Celia's lead?" He gave a half smile. "Still living in the past?" Clara stepped forward, calm but firm. "No. I'm living in the truth, the part you helped bury." He raised an eyebrow. "You really think anyone's going to believe some napkin sketches over a multi-million-dollar firm?" Graham spoke before Clara could. Spoke before. "Funny thing about sketches," he said, voice quiet but undeniable. "They tend to outlive the people who dismiss them." Matt looked at him, blinking. "And you are?" "Someone who bought Clara's design 3 years ago," Graham said. "From a submission with her initials, which means I have the receipt, which means Sunhaven and everyone attached to it is standing on something stolen." Matt's face went still. Clara watched him, watched the mask slip, just for a second. "You want to keep talking," she said, "or do you want to listen while the rest of the room finds out who really built Sunhaven?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She turned back to her table, heart thundering. Graham leaned in, close enough for her to feel his breath. "You were born for this moment," he said. She looked up at him. "I think," she whispered, "I finally believe that." And just then, the first round of applause broke out. Not loud, not overwhelming, but true. It started with one, then two, then a ripple that carried through the corner of the room where truth had been waiting patiently, quietly, to finally be seen. Clara leaned against the back wall of the gallery space, heart still racing, trying to catch her breath beneath the weight of the applause. Her hands trembled, not from nerves anymore, but from release. 3 years of silence, of second-guessing, of swallowing what she should have screamed, had finally cracked. But even in that small moment of victory, the question returned. "What now?" The crowd began to scatter, conversations blooming between tables again. A few curious visitors lingered at Clara's booth, gently flipping through her sketches. One woman whispered to her husband, "She's the real designer. I knew it." And Clara caught herself blinking hard, swallowing a knot she hadn't expected to feel today. Graham found her with practiced ease. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, hands folded over his cane, his quiet presence cutting through the noise more deeply than anyone's words. "You didn't flinch," he said. She let out a slow breath. "Not this time." "I told you," he murmured. "Your voice just needed a room big enough to echo." Clara glanced toward the door. Celia had left 15 minutes ago, face unreadable, her smile long gone. Matt hadn't spoken another word after Graham's statement. The expression he wore when he walked away, haunted, not furious, told Clara everything she needed to know. But still, she couldn't quite unclench the tension in her jaw. "Is it wrong," she whispered, "that I wanted more than a moment?" Graham turned toward her slightly. "What do you mean?" "I wanted them to say it. Out loud. That it was mine. That they took it. That they were wrong." He considered that. "You didn't need their apology," he said gently. "You gave yourself the truth." "But it still aches," she admitted. "That means it mattered," he replied. The soft chime of the closing announcement rang out through the room. Volunteers began breaking down panels, unplugging lights, folding chairs into neat rows. The magic of the moment, like all good things, was turning back into reality. Clara began collecting her sketches. As she tucked the last drawing into her leather folder, Graham stepped closer. "Walk with me?" She nodded. They stepped out into the early evening air. The sun hovered low over the marshland, casting long shadows across the water, and the path ahead shimmered with heat and memory. They walked in silence for a while, gravel crunching beneath their shoes. Then Clara spoke. "I spent so long building rooms for people to feel safe in. I never thought about what I needed from one." "What do you need now?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Space. To grow. To speak. To fall apart sometimes without losing everything." He nodded slowly, letting the silence settle again like a soft blanket between them. "And you?" she asked. "What do you need?" Graham paused. Then, voice low, steady. "For a long time I thought I needed stillness. After I lost my sight, I tried to rebuild with control, precision, order. But then you showed up." She turned toward him. "You walk into a space and see what it could be," he said, "not what it was. You speak like rooms are people, and I think, maybe I've been treating people like rooms." Her breath caught. "You mean distant?" "I mean measured. Safe. Silent." She laughed, not unkindly. "That's not always a bad thing." "No," he agreed, "but it's lonely." They reached the edge of a wooden dock that stretched out over the water, wind brushing gently across their faces. Clara leaned against the railing, fingers gripping the warm, worn wood. The sky burned soft pink at the edges. "I don't know how to start again," she admitted. "You already have." She turned her head, watching him as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded sheet of paper. He held it toward her. "I've been carrying this." She took it carefully. Unfolded it. It was her original sketch, the one she'd left behind in the shuttle van that first day, the design that had sparked all of this. "I didn't know you kept it," she said. "I knew it wasn't mine to lose." Clara traced the lines with her fingertip. They were imperfect. Raw, honest. "People will question everything I do now," she said quietly. "They'll assume I'm where I am because of you." He didn't argue. "But I want to stand on my own," she added. Graham nodded. "Then let me stand beside you. Nothing more." The wind picked up, tugging strands of hair across her cheek. She tucked them behind her ear, heart full of something deeper than gratitude. Hope. He turned toward the water. "Do you want to build something together?" She didn't answer right away. Then, after a pause, she said, "Yes, but not just with wood and glass." He turned to face her, something unfolding gently behind his stillness. "Then what?" "With trust," she said. "With time, and the kind of silence that feels like understanding, not absence." They stood there for a while, watching the last light fall into the marsh, their shoulders nearly touching but not quite, and it was enough. For now, enough to begin again, on her terms, on ground that finally felt like her own. The next few days were quiet. But not the kind of quiet Clara used to dread. This was the quiet of turning soil, of roots catching just beneath the surface, of beginnings stretching towards something not yet visible. She spent her mornings in her studio again, sunlight pooling on the floor, windows cracked open to let in the soft hum of the neighborhood. Sketches returned to her like breath, not perfect, but hers. And in the center of it all was a new concept, something that combined the intimacy of her Sunhaven vision with what she now knew: ownership, resilience, legacy. Graham called it Havenmark. Not a rebrand, a reclamation. It would start with the old coastal property they'd visited together, the one wrapped in ivy and memory. The house no one had dared to touch since its foundation began to sink. But Clara saw something in it. The bones. The promise. Late one morning she met Graham on site again. He stood with a survey map in one hand, the other resting casually on his cane. "You're early," he said as she stepped out of her truck, sketchbook under her arm. "I didn't sleep," Clara admitted. "My brain wouldn't shut up." "Designer's curse," she smiled. "Or maybe blessing." They walked slowly through the overgrown grass, past the porch steps, into the sun-drenched ruin of what would soon become home for someone. Clara knelt near the front archway, running her hand over the cracked threshold. "This curve, this should stay." "You're the boss," Graham said. "I'm just here to sign the checks," she laughed. "Not true. You're here because this was yours too." "In some way." His smile softened. "Maybe. But it feels better in your hands." Just as she stood up, a voice called from the road. "Clara?" She turned, squinting against the glare. A woman stepped out of a silver sedan, shoulder-length curls, crisp blazer, clipboard in hand. "Can I help you?" Clara asked cautiously. The woman offered a small smile. "Dinah Lynn, PR, Sunhaven Properties." "We spoke on the phone." Clara's posture stiffened slightly. Graham moved beside her, silent but present. "I came alone," Dana said quickly, reading the tension. "Not here to confront. I'm here because the board is discussing a settlement." Clara blinked. "A settlement?" "Yes. Quiet, private. A non-disclosure clause, a licensing payout, and formal acknowledgement that your original design influenced Sunhaven's direction. No admission of wrongdoing." "Just closure." Clara's stomach tightened. "You mean silence? Again?" Dana hesitated. "Some things don't go backward cleanly. This would allow you to move forward." Graham's voice cut in, quiet but firm. "She already is." Dana nodded slowly, then turned back to Clara. "I won't push, but the offer stands. They'd prefer to avoid litigation and public hearings. You're gaining momentum." Clara looked down at the sketchbook in her hands. Her fingers brushed the corner of the page. "Why now?" she asked. Dinah met her gaze evenly. "Because your story is starting to sound like the truth. And because some of us on the inside believe you." For a moment, Clara didn't move. Then, voice low, even, "Tell the board I'm not interested in being quiet again." Dinah exhaled, almost like relief. "I thought you'd say that." She offered a card. Clara didn't take it. "I'm not angry," Clara said. "I just want my name." Dana tucked the card back in her pocket. "Then keep saying it." She walked back to her car and drove off, tires crunching slowly over the gravel. Graham turned toward Clara. "How do you feel?" Clara let out a breath. "Wrecked and alive." They stood in silence. The wind moved through the open house, lifting a curtain of vines from the back window like breath. "I think we should launch it here," Clara said softly. "The new concept. Havenmark. This house rebuilt as the prototype, not just an architectural comeback, an emotional one, a home with a story." He nodded. "You'll need a launch event." "I'll need more than that. Legal help. Press coverage. A team." "You've got me," he said. She looked at him, warmth curling in her chest. "I'm not used to partnership feeling like peace." "It should," he said. "When it's real." Her voice dipped. "Graham, what are we really doing?" He paused, then gently, "Are you talking about the house or us?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the broken frame of the kitchen door. "I've been building everything in pieces for so long," she said. "Dreams, plans, even myself. It's hard to know what part of this is safe to lean on." He turned toward her, the light brushing the edges of his face. "Then lean gently, but don't stay standing alone." She blinked back the sudden heat behind her eyes. "You're different than I expected," she whispered. "So are you," he said. They stood in the quiet skeleton of what would soon be home. Again. Not just for someone, but for something. A new name, a new legacy. And maybe, just maybe, a new beginning for them both. The first time Clara saw the mock-up for the Havenmark logo, she cried. Not loud, not even visibly. Just this subtle crumpling inside her chest that pulled her still. A single teardrop slipped down her cheek and landed on the paper, right over the small sketch of the curved front porch line, her line, woven into the typography like it had always been meant to be there. She hadn't designed the logo. That was Jonah, a branding artist Graham brought in. But somehow, he'd caught the thread of everything she'd been trying to say for years and stitched it into one quiet mark. Shelter and strength. Heritage and hope. "This," she whispered, running her fingers over the ink. "This feels like standing up." Jonah smiled. "Good. That's exactly how it should feel." The plans were finally in motion. Graham had set up the initial funding, quietly, respectfully, after she agreed to let him come in not as a benefactor, but as a partner. The house would be rebuilt as the first Havenmark property, a symbol of reclaiming what was lost and turning it into something new, something permanent. But even with momentum, the past doesn't let go all at once. That night, as Clara packed up her materials after another long design session, she found a letter slid under the door. No envelope, just her name in quick cursive on the folded edge. She stared at it for a long moment before unfolding it. "Clara, you were right to speak. That design was never mine to use, though I convinced myself otherwise. You were talented, so young, so raw, but I saw it. I should have guided you, mentored you. Instead, I profited from what wasn't mine. No legal team will tell me to say this. No PR firm would draft it. But I needed you to hear it from me. I'm sorry. Celia." Clara stood in the middle of her studio, the silence vibrating around her. She should have felt triumphant, vindicated. But what she felt instead was more complicated. Exhaustion. Relief. And underneath it, something softer. Grief for what they could have built if trust had been part of the story from the beginning. She folded the letter gently and tucked it into a drawer without ceremony. Graham came by an hour later, as planned. He carried a bag of takeout and a small bouquet of wildflowers tucked awkwardly under one arm. "You didn't have to do that," Clara said, taking the flowers with a smile she didn't quite know how to hold. "I wanted to," he said simply. They ate on the floor, pad thai and spring rolls spread out over an old blueprint. Clara told him about the letter, watching the play of thought pass over his face. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. "I don't think so," she said. "I think I needed to hear it more than I need to answer it." He nodded. Closure doesn't always need a full conversation. "No," she agreed. "Sometimes it just needs a full stop." After dinner, they stood by the window. The city lights blinked far in the distance. The hum of a freight train curled softly in the background, almost nostalgic. Graham turned toward her. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." Clara's heart skipped once, then twice. "Okay. When this house is finished and Havenmark is out in the world, what's next for you?" She blinked. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "I think you have," he said gently. She exhaled. "I want to keep building. Not just structures. Spaces, communities. Places where people feel seen." "That sounds like something worth chasing." She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had walked into her life by mistake and stayed on purpose. Who never tried to fix her, but always stood close enough to let her fix herself. "Graham." "Yes." She hesitated. "Are we building something too?" The air between them stilled. He stepped closer, not fast, not dramatic, just real. Measured. "I think we already are," he said, "but I'm not in a rush. We've both had too many moments stolen from us." Clara swallowed. "I'm scared to fall into something too fast, or to need someone again." He reached out, slowly, and touched her hand. "You don't need me," he said. "That's why this works." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the truth of it settle deep in her chest. No rush. No pressure, just presence. When she looked back up at him, she was smiling. Small, real. "Stay a while?" she asked. He nodded. "Always." They sat on the floor again, backs against the wall, their shoulders just touching. She leaned her head on his eventually. Not out of dependence, but out of choice, out of comfort. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, something stronger than design was being built. It had no blueprints, but it was hers. The wind rolled through the open frame of the house, carrying in the scent of salt and pine. Clara stood near what would soon be the kitchen window, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the exposed beams. Her vision had been transferred from sketch to structure, and yet something sat unsettled inside her. They were ahead of schedule. The team Graham hired, most of them local, some even former students of her college program, had transformed the ruined property into a real beginning. Havenmark wasn't just happening. It was real. But the phone call that came that morning had unsettled everything. "Clara?" Graham's voice drifted from behind her. She turned to find him entering through the open threshold, tapping lightly with his cane. "You didn't answer my text." "I needed a minute," she said, quieter than usual. He paused. "Everything okay?" Clara hesitated. "I got a call from a news outlet this morning. National. Not just design media, mainstream. They want to run a piece on me. On Havenmark. On the entire journey." Graham's brows lifted, the beginning of a smile forming. "That's incredible." "It is," she said. "Except they also want access to the original licensing documents. To Sun Haven's internal history. They're pushing to name names." Graham stilled. "Including Celia." Clara nodded. He stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "And what do you want?" She turned back to the window frame. "That's the part I'm trying to figure out." He waited. "I didn't do this for revenge," she said slowly. "I did it to be heard, to take something back. But if I let the story get twisted into a public shaming, if I let them paint her as the villain, doesn't that change what Havenmark is supposed to mean?" "You don't owe her protection," Graham said softly. "I know. But I owe myself integrity." He exhaled, the sound long and steady. "So what now?" "I told the reporter I'd think about it." A silence followed, not heavy, just full. Then Graham spoke again. "Do you want to come see something?" Clara turned, surprised by the shift in tone. "What is it?" "Something I haven't shown anyone in a long time." She followed him outside and into his car. He didn't explain much, just told her to drive along the old coastal road that veered away from town, past the wildflower fields, and up toward a quiet ridge overlooking the bay. When they arrived, he asked her to stop at a weather-worn gate. Beyond it sat a house, old, small, mostly hidden beneath moss and trees, but well cared for. The kind of house built with intention, not wealth. "This was my parents' place," he said, voice low. "I haven't brought anyone here since the accident." Clara looked over at him. "Are you sure? I need you to see it." They walked slowly up the path. The house creaked as they entered, not with disrepair, but memory. Photographs lined the mantel. A record player in the corner. Worn floors smoothed by time. Graham moved through the space as if tracing ghosts. "My father taught me everything I know about restoration," he said. "He believed every house had a soul, that we're just the next set of hands to hold it." Clara walked to the old window seat, running her fingers over the cushion seams. "It's beautiful." He joined her, standing near the center of the room. "After the accident, after I lost my sight, I stopped coming. I thought, if I couldn't see what I'd built, I couldn't trust that it still stood." She turned toward him. "But watching you rebuild Havenmark," he said quietly, "I realized something. The truest things don't need to be seen to still be real." Clara's breath caught. "I've been afraid," he continued, "that maybe I was just a bridge for you, from broken to whole, from invisible to seen." "You weren't a bridge," she said, stepping closer. "You were the steady part when the ground fell out. I've never loved anyone the way I love you, Clara," he said, "and I didn't expect to. Not like this." "Not now." She reached for his hand. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "Scared of falling into something I can't control." "But I've never wanted to build something so badly." His fingers tightened around hers. "Then let's build it. Slowly. On solid ground." They stood there, hand in hand, in the home that built him, in the moment that began something new. Later, as the sky turned amber, Clara looked back once more before they drove off. She made her decision the next morning. The article would run, but without the names, no accusations, no takedowns. Just the truth of what was lost, what was reclaimed, and what stood in its place. Because the house mattered. But so did the way it was built. The rain came soft and steady the morning of the Havenmark launch. Clara sat on the front steps of the completed house, the porch light humming behind her, warm against the slate-gray sky. The scent of pine mingled with fresh paint and damp earth. For a moment, everything was still. She didn't feel nervous. Not exactly. It was something quieter than that, like the hush before music starts. Not fear, not doubt. Just the weight of knowing what this day meant. This wasn't just a launch. It was her name finally standing on its own legs. Footsteps approached behind her, familiar and light. "You're out here early," Graham said. She glanced back with a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." He stepped onto the porch beside her. His coat was still unbuttoned, hair slightly damp. "You've done something beautiful. It still doesn't feel real." "It is," he said softly. "It's more real than anything I've touched in years." She turned back to the yard, watching drops collect on the railing. "Do you think they'll come?" They already are. I passed 3 cars pulling in. She nodded, heart picking up its rhythm. A long silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then Clara exhaled slowly. There's something I need to tell you. He waited. The article. It's going viral. The traffic's flooding the site. My inbox is chaos. A few brands want to license the Havenmark model as a featured concept. She paused. One of them is from New York. Big money, big reach. He didn't react. They want me to lead the project. Still quiet. In Manhattan. For 6 months. Graham's expression didn't change, but Clara saw his chest rise slowly, the kind of breath you take when you're choosing calm over instinct. You should go, he said. She blinked. That's it? You've earned it. But what about us? He stepped forward, his hands finding hers with ease. This, what we've built, isn't bound to a zip code. You said it yourself. This is a beginning. Not a limit. Her throat tightened. I don't want to leave you. You're not leaving me, he said gently. You're becoming more of yourself. I'd never ask you to pause that. Not for me, not for anything. The first car rolled into the gravel drive. Then another. People with umbrellas stepped out, shielding themselves against the drizzle. One held a bouquet. Another carried a camera. Graham leaned closer, lowering his voice just for her. You once told me you wanted space. To grow, to breathe. This. He touched her heart lightly with 2 fingers. Is you in bloom? Clara felt her eyes sting. I want you there with me. I'll visit, I'll wait, I'll cheer louder than anyone in the room. But you need to take this step alone, because it's yours. The door creaked open behind them. Jonah's head popped out. 10 minutes, Clara. You ready? She nodded, her voice caught somewhere between a laugh and a tear. Almost. Jonah gave a thumbs up and ducked back inside. Clara turned to Graham one more time, searching his face. Will you walk with me? He offered his arm. Anywhere. They moved together into the house, passing the curated display. Her sketches, the photo series of the rebuild, framed prints of the original porch line beside the new one. Guests began filling the space, voices low with awe, admiration, something close to reverence. And then someone clapped, then another, and another. Until the house was filled with applause, not for the building, but for the soul inside it. Clara stood at the center of the room, heart loud in her chest, and felt the ground beneath her grow firm. When she stepped forward to speak, she didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried all the way through. The train pulled into Penn Station just after 9, its metal frame hissing as it settled onto the tracks. Clara stepped onto the platform with her sketchpad tucked tight beneath her arm, the air around her buzzing with the rhythm of a city that never let anything sleep too long. This was not home, not yet, but it was something else, a proving ground. Outside, the Manhattan sky loomed gray and glittering. Cab horns, coffee carts, business shoes on wet pavement. It all beat together in a drumline of ambition. She could already feel the pulse of it beneath her ribs. 6 months. That was the deal. Lead the architectural direction for one of the most ambitious housing reimaginings in the city. Take the Havenmark concept and bring it to life where space was currency and intention got lost somewhere between deadlines and bottom lines. It was everything she had asked for, everything she had fought for, But now, standing in the thick of it, she felt the hollow stretch of distance. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out and smiled before she even read the message. Graham, let me guess. You're pretending not to be overwhelmed by 400 people in the station. She laughed under her breath, fingers already tapping a reply. Clara, they can smell the imposter syndrome. Graham, nonsense. You smell like power and potential, and that slightly burnt lavender candle you always overuse when you're stressed. Clara, you miss me already? A pause. Then the dots blinked, stopped, blinked again. Graham, always. She stared at the screen for a long moment, holding the softness of that word in her chest like a heartbeat. A driver held up a placard with her name, spelled right. She gave him a small nod, climbed into the black car, and let the city rise around her like scaffolding. Her temporary apartment sat above a bakery in the East Village, the kind of place where the floors creaked and the radiator hissed like it had secrets. It was perfect. Just unfamiliar enough to keep her present. Clara spent the next week buried in meetings, developers, investors, urban policy advisors, the first round of public hearings. Some people saw her as a visionary, others saw her as a risk, everyone saw her as a story. And stories, she knew now, were currency. By the second weekend, she found herself walking toward a bookstore, just to breathe something softer than ambition. She ran her fingers along spines of poetry collections and cookbooks she had no time to use. Her coat still smelled like the old porch wood back home. As she turned a corner, she nearly collided with a man holding a cane. Her breath hitched. It wasn't Graham. Of course it wasn't. But the memory of him was visceral. She missed the way he moved through a space, like listening instead of leading. She missed the sound of his voice when he read out loud without knowing it. The way he said her name, like it was always mid-sentence. That night, she opened her laptop to a blinking cursor and started a letter. Graham, I don't know how to say this without it sounding too dramatic, but I miss you like sunlight, not desperate, just constant. Like I forget it's missing until I feel it again. She stared at the words, deleted them. Started again. Today I watched a building fall into shadow between two others, and I realized how many beautiful things get lost when we don't make space on purpose. Still not right. She closed the laptop. The phone rang 20 minutes later. Can't sleep? His voice came through, steady as ever. No, she said, curling her knees up to her chest. It's loud here, even when it's quiet. I figured. She hesitated. I keep trying to write you something big, but the words feel smaller than the truth. You don't have to write it, he said. You're already saying it. Silence. I feel like I should be over this part by now, she whispered. The missing part. Missing someone doesn't mean you're breaking, he said. Sometimes it means you're building something worth returning to. She let that sit. Then, I can't promise anything. Not yet. I'm not asking you to, he said. Just don't close the door before I get there. Tears stung her eyes. You always know exactly what to say. He laughed softly. It's not that. I just know exactly who I'm saying it to. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his voice fold around her. I'm still here, he said, and she believed him. The first real snow came early that year, dusting the brownstone rooftops and casting Manhattan in a hush Clara hadn't felt since arriving. It wasn't silence exactly. This city didn't do silence, but something like surrender, a moment of pause between movement and meaning. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the project office, sketchpad open. Her pencil paused mid-line. Outside, flakes spiraled through traffic lights and steam vents, like the city was finally remembering how to exhale. Across the table, Nora, her project manager and unexpected kindred spirit, sipped coffee and studied the site renderings.
"You've redrawn this atrium 6 times, Nora said, her tone gentle but direct.
Clara didn't look up. Something's off. The angles feel too transactional. It's an affordable housing prototype, not a sculpture garden. It still needs to feel like a rival, Clara murmured. Like hope. Nora tilted her head. You sound like someone who's thinking about something bigger than floor plans. Clara set the pencil down. I am. Nora waited, quietly giving space. I thought coming here would settle something inside me, Clara said. But I keep waking up wondering if I've traded one version of being unseen for another. Nora leaned in. Is this about the work? Or about him? Clara didn't answer right away. I built my name here. I fought for it, she said. But I think I left the part of me that believes in why back home. Nora's expression softened. So go back. I can't just walk out before this wraps. Yes, you can, Nora said. You've built the foundation. You've mentored your team. You've done more than they asked. Go before this place changes the parts of you that were already finally healing. Clara looked at her, stunned by the clarity in her words. Don't stay just to prove that you can, Nora added. You already did. That night, Clara walked the High Line, breath puffing white in front of her. Her boots crunched against the salted wood, and the skyline glowed like it had secrets. She dialed Graham. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call. She smiled, the tension between her ribs loosening. How'd you know I would? Because snow makes people remember what warmth feels like. I miss you. I'm here, he said. Always. I'm coming home. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was relief. When? End of next week, once I hand things off. I'll leave the porch light on. She laughed, breath catching on something too big to name. I don't want to pick up where we left off. A pause. I want to start fresh, with you, with the house. With everything. His voice came soft. Clara, whatever we build next, it's not going to be a redo. It's going to be brand new. And it'll be ours. She looked up at the snow drifting through the golden glow of a street lamp. Can I tell you something strange? Always. I feel like I'm walking toward myself again. I know, he said. I've been watching you return to you for months. Her eyes brimmed. And I can't wait, he added, to build a life where you never have to leave pieces of yourself behind just to make room for someone else. She held the phone tighter, heart wide open now. Say it again, she whispered. I can't wait. She closed her eyes and let the city disappear. Only the sound of his voice remained. And it was everything. The sun had just crested over the tree line when Clara's car pulled up the long gravel drive, the tires crunching with a sound that felt like punctuation. The old house, no, her house, stood quietly at the top of the hill, the soft glow of porch lights already lit, despite the rising morning. She turned off the engine, but didn't open the door right away. Instead, she sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the way the light stretched across the wood siding. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't modern. It didn't scream luxury or flash. But it felt sacred, because it had been torn down and rebuilt, not just the walls, not just the porch, but everything that had once felt unfinished in her. The door opened before she could move. Graham stood on the steps, cane in one hand, coffee in the other. I counted the seconds, he said, smiling. You knew I'd come this early? I didn't sleep,
he replied. Besides, I always said I'd leave the light on. Clara stepped out slowly, legs stiff from the long drive. The breeze lifted her hair as she walked up the path, and the moment their hands met, she felt that strange, familiar click, like returning a puzzle piece to its rightful place. I thought I might cry, she said softly. You still can, he said. We've got time. They stood in the doorway for a moment longer before stepping inside. The space smelled like fresh cedar, coffee, and something warm baking, maybe cinnamon. The sunlight filtered in through the windows just the way she'd sketched it months ago. She walked through the open layout, her fingers grazing the soft finish of the counters, the reclaimed oak of the staircase railing. Everything she'd designed, here. Real, lived in. Is this what it's going to be like? She asked. Being home? He stepped beside her, reaching for her hand. It's what we'll make it. In the living room sat a table already set for breakfast. 2 plates. A folded newspaper, a single sunflower in a mason jar. On the wall behind it, hung on brass hooks, was her first original concept sketch for the house, the one that Celia had once tried to erase. Now framed, untouched, untamed. You did this, Clara said. Graham nodded. I didn't want to hang anything until you got back. I didn't know what I'd find when I came home, she admitted, voice catching slightly. I was scared it wouldn't feel the same. He turned toward her then. It's not the same. You're not the same. And that's the point. Clara looked at him, eyes bright. I still don't have a perfect plan. Perfect plans break, he said. But you bend. And then you build. She swallowed. This, whatever this is, it's not just love. It's something steadier. Yeah, he said quietly. It's trust. They sat down together, eating slowly, letting conversation drift in and out like breath. He told her about the community workshops they'd started. She told him about the scholarship fund she'd set up in her grandfather's name. They planned the second Havenmark site, a lakeside structure meant for multi-generational living. Then the third, near the Georgia border, designed for widowed veterans and local artists. Not charity, not trend, just belonging. As the sun rose higher, casting gold across the floorboards, Clara moved to the porch. She stood at the edge and let the view spill into her. Everything in her life had changed. But this was what it all had pointed to. Not the applause, not the headlines, not the glossy magazine spreads, but a home where her name wasn't just on the deed. It was in the grain of the wood, the curve of the walls, the morning air she now breathed without fear. Graham joined her, silent for a moment. Then, you remember what you said the first day you met me? I said I was the wrong person, she replied, a half smile tugging at her lips. And I said I'd take the chance anyway. She looked at him, her heart soft and wide open. Thank you for seeing something in me when I couldn't. He shook his head gently. I didn't see something. I saw you. They stood there a while longer, the wind rustling the trees, birds calling somewhere in the distance. And then Clara said it. I'm not just driving anymore. He tilted his head. I'm arriving. Graham's smile deepened. She leaned against him, eyes closed. That morning, no ribbon was cut, no camera crew arrived, no spotlight flashed. But something infinitely more sacred unfolded in that quiet hour. A woman who had once been mistaken, overlooked and silenced, now stood on her own front porch, heart open, name intact, and future unshakably hers. And that, in the end, was the real story.
A love not born from rescue, but from return. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way.